Coming up on a new edition of the Zach Lowe Show to start your week, we're talking Tyler Herro's injury, the Heat. How bad is this for them? Could this be a not tanking year, but maybe not great year for the Heat? And we're using Tyler Herro, who's eligible for an extension starting October 1st, to look at some of the trickiest veteran extension candidates, not the rookie seal guys, veteran extension candidates. There's some big names, some sneaky names. You got your Cats, your Darius Garlands, your Trae Youngs, Kevin Durant, AJ Green, Cam Johnson on the sneakier side. What's going to happen with all these players? Is anyone going to sign extensions among this veteran group? When, where, how, who? Austin Reeves, Rui Hachimura. We got some Lakers discussion in there too. Then we got Dan Hurley, the head coach of University of Connecticut's men's basketball team. He corrected me, I said 5-time. 6-time national champions, twice under him. Failed in their bid for a three-peat. We get into everything, including the Lakers thing. Was it real? How real was it? He just wrote a book where he details all this. We're going to talk about the book that he wrote with Ian O'Connor. All things UConn, his alumni in the NBA, and one thing we are not going to talk about today is the sad sack New York Mets. We're putting that on the back burner. Thank you for listening, watching. Hope you enjoy this edition of the Zach Lowe Show. This episode of the Zach Lowe Show is presented by HubSpot. Using only 20% of your business data is like going from a starting 5 to a starting 1. Good luck with that. But that's how most businesses operate today, using only 20% of their data, unless you have HubSpot, where all the data hidden in emails, call logs, and chat messages turns into insights to grow your business, because having all the data makes all the difference. Learn more at HubSpot.com. Welcome to the Zach Lowe Show. It's Monday. Sam Amick from The Athletic is here. How you doing, buddy?
Zach Lowe, what's up, stranger? Great to see your face. Great to be on the pod. I'm doing well. You know, we were just complaining about our various weather patterns on opposite sides of the country. Those are the things you do when you're not NBA busy enough, but we're getting there.
You know what I'm not going to complain about today, Sam Amick? Not going to complain about the New York Mets dropping 2 straight games to the Washington Nationals and falling out of the wild card spot to the freaking Cincinnati Reds. We're just gonna leave it there. There might be some alcohol consumed on this podcast on Thursday if the next few days go badly. I want to give a special FU to the Chicago Cubs for getting swept by the Cincinnati Reds and barely scoring any runs. You are on my shit list, Chicago Cubs. I don't care who's a fan of you. Okay. The biggest
hold on,
news...
I gotta tie a bow on that since you had to go down the baseball road. Again, bi-coastal here, a longtime San Francisco Giants fan. And while they did beat the Dodgers last night, they are equally out of reach in the wild card at the moment. So I feel your pain, buddy, and maybe alcohol as well.
One of my favorite ballparks in the country, and my daughter, when the Mets were playing the Giants, was fascinated by the concept of a splash hit. She's like, how does this happen? Who does this? It's the greatest thing she's ever seen. Okay, the news of the weekend, such as it was Tyler Herro undergoing foot surgery and missing, according to ESPN and other reports, about 8 weeks, which could be 14, 15 games for the Miami Heat. The first thing that I thought of was, the Heat, who I was high on, should I still be high on them? I don't know. Coming into the season, I thought they were being underrated by Vegas, NBA pundits, and all that. Sure. They don't have a, even for someone with a rosy outlook like me, they didn't have a lot of margin for error if their goal was a top 6 seed. And so this is like, particularly for a team whose offense has been terrible and lacking in shot creation, this, even if it's a 14, 15 game absence, could be a big deal, putting them behind the 8 ball. If they get too far behind the 8 ball, a lot of interesting possibilities open up for a team that owns its pick in this particular year, but not the next year. I'm not going there yet. I'm just saying it's out there. Like Terry Rozier might have to be resurrected. Yakuchunas, the rookie, might have to play. Norm Powell, I think, probably slides at the Hero starting spot. And I just, this is a tough one for the Heat. They better hope for a quick recovery, because like their offense was like 21st, 22nd last year. He's their best offensive player. This could get dicey for them, but it did get us thinking about, Tyler Herro on October 1st becomes eligible for a 3-year, $150 million extension. He has 2 guaranteed years left on his deal, 31 and 33. And that got me thinking, like, he's a pretty dicey not dicey like bad, but just a really interesting extension candidate. Like, what's the number? Would the Heat even do it? Would the Heat do it now? What number would make them do it? What is his trade value around the league? And then it got me interested in like, who are the other kind of thorny extension candidates among the veterans? Not the rookie scale guys, but the veteran guys that are eligible for extension. There's some sneaky ones. I thought Sam Amick, he's always got the intel. He's always got the juice. He's always got something to say. So why don't we do that? Let's start with Tyler Herro. Any thoughts on his injury?
Yeah, terrible timing, like you said. I like how you framed it. The margin for error for this group was already so thin, with ambitious aspirations of trying to push for a back-end playoff spot. I'm with you. I think, collectively, bad news, individually bad news, because, you already have this dynamic where, they continue to be behind Bam Adebayo in terms of part of their core. They obviously did what they did with Jimmy Butler and pivoted there. We know the competitiveness and the culture where they're always going to try to stay in it, but where is that threshold, right? Does the Herro injury, if it leads to a slow start to the year, end up having a domino effect when it comes to not only his talks, but the plan overall? Because as far as your question of him as a player, Zach, I looked at it, not to pull the old stat head thing, but it's like, all right, 23, 5-5 last year, one of 7 players who played at least 60 games to hit those marks. But it was obviously a terrible year on the back end, and those are somewhat hollow numbers, at least to a degree. So it does make for a fascinating negotiation, especially when you put the health into it.
Yeah, Tyler Herro is a really good player. Like, very good offensive player. Had a great year last year, made the All-Star team. He also gets picked on defense quite a bit. I looked this up. Only one guard in the league got put into more pick and rolls on defense than he did as the guy guarding the screener. And we will get to that guard shortly. He is my favorite extension case in a long, long time. He also has, Tyler Herro, unlike that guard and others, has next season 26-27 is fully locked in. It's not a player option. It's not anything. And so if I were the Heat, I would just do nothing now because I just, he can get anywhere up to 30% of the max. You could start there, I think, on his extension. And I'm just like, I'm not going anywhere near that. I don't know what the right number is. And although I think he's a very good player, I think his current salary is fair. It did get me to thinking, like, alternatively, what is Tyler Herro's trade value? Like, who would give you real stuff just for Tyler Herro? And I came up with a little bit of a list, Sam, but I don't think his trade value on this current contract is very high, in part because whoever trades for him knows the same thing that the Heat know right now. It's like, we're going to have to pay this guy, and we don't know what the number is.
No, I couldn't agree more. And we'll get to this, but league-wide, when you have this suppression of maxes, and you have guys like Tyler Herro, who I think, if not, pushing for a max, have visions of being that kind of a guy, that's where the discussions get uncomfortable between team and player side. So the defensive concerns are legitimate. And again, because of the history of that franchise and what they're purported to be constantly pushing for, which is nothing, less than title contention, I don't think you want to get saddled with a big number when you don't have more clarity in terms of who is going to be a part of that core and where you're going.
Yeah, Herro was like a perfect candidate to be included in a trade for a better player, which is what they tried to do with Damian Lillard and maybe who knows others. On his own, as a guy, trade him for future assets or a good young player, I'm not sure what the value is. You want me to go through my Tyler Herro theoretical teams real fast?
For sure. Let's hear it.
Detroit, don't think that's the guy they're going to rush to pair with Cade. You can see the shooting, playmaking fit, but I would say no. Toronto just needs anybody who could shoot. But I think there's just a lot of questions there. I don't know what salary, what player the Heat would even want back from the Raptors. Milwaukee, he's from Wisconsin. At that point, you're topping out on basically salary relief. We'll give you the end of Kuzma's deal, maybe an okay young player. Are you satisfied with that? I thought about Charlotte just for the sheer humor of LaMelo Ball and Tyler Herro together. I don't see it. Clippers, apron issues. Lakers have Austin Reeves. My favorite, Dallas could put together Clay plus Gafford. I don't really see what the point of that is for either team. And again, sure. Dallas then has to face down having 3 huge salaries, potentially with Kyrie and AD. My favorite one was Minnesota and building a deal around Naz Reid and filler for Tyler Herro and rebalancing the Wolves roster and putting him on the same team as like a whole army of awesome defensive players. Is Naz Reid a great fit in Miami? I think with Bam, maybe, but then he becomes a third big with Ware and Bam. I don't know. It's just like, it's hard to find like the team that's like, oh yeah, here's 3 first-round picks for Tyler Herro. I just don't think that deal is out there. And I think they'll discuss an extension on October 1st when they're allowed to start doing it. It would surprise me if the Heat would do a number that Tyler Herro would do right now. And this injury is concerning. It's concerning.
I like a lot of those. I mean, to me, it's got to be a team that's somewhat close. You know what I mean? It's the Minnesotas. I could see the Milwaukee scenario. Detroit, I like that as well in a vacuum. I think, you're talking about Anthony Edwards and Tyler on the T-Wolf side. It's got to be something where it's close. But I'm with you. I think it's a tough landscape.
Yeah, I don't see any of those happening. And Detroit's interesting. I don't see them doing a head over heels deal for Tyler Herro, and Milwaukee just doesn't have enough to offer the Heat.
Right.
So the veteran extensions are always sneaky because our radar this year is always on like the Jaden Ivey, Jalen Durant, on all the rookie scale guys that are coming up. Dyson Daniels is a big one for extensions. I like these guys because they're sneaky. They sneak up on you a little bit timetable wise, and what the player and the team does in these situations can really be telling about what happens in the future. The headliner is going to be Trae Young. I'm saving Trae Young for last because I just can't talk about this situation enough. It's the most interesting situation in the entire league. And we're going to talk about the Pat Bev beef because I was going to say,
when are you having Pat Bev on?
I don't know that he'll do it. But I did listen to all of it. I listened to it. Did you? I dove in and I did the homework.
I listened to quite a bit, not the whole thing, but yeah, a lot of it.
Let's go rapid fire through some guys that people may or may not realize are eligible for extensions either now or very soon, like on October 1, and in some cases just for a limited period of time. You ready?
Yep.
Rapid fire. We'll do some big names first. Karl Anthony Towns.
You want thoughts?
I want thoughts. Well, let's outline. He has 53, 57 player option for 61. He is or will be soon eligible for an extension of such heft that I did not even bother looking up the number. It's just a lot of freaking money. Right. Thoughts, Sam Amick?
Well, you just hit it on the back end of your breakdown there. I think there's a 3-year possibility, but the 2 years is about 150. You're talking about $75 million a year. The timeline, I don't see the urgency because, he's got the player option in 27. You did the Mikal Bridges deal. You did the Jalen Brunson deal. You've still got Cat for a minute here. And I think they've got to figure out the absolute ceiling on what they have after that season that was so exciting for Knicks fans. And then on the back end, was disappointing at the end. Where Cat fits into it. I mean, if you're doing something like this, I think the question is, do you really want to commit to Cat in his mid-30s? And that's no disrespect to him, but he's a big who's had some injury stuff. To me, that's why I don't see something getting done here.
The number is so big. Even if you go down from what his salary would be, the number would still be so big. And they still have time that I just can't imagine anything happening right now. Related to that, Knicks have 2 more guys that are, I think, almost more interesting than Cat. Mitchell Robinson, who's in the final year of his contract for $12.9 million, and Deuce McBride is already eligible for another extension. My quick read on both those situations, and please disagree with me if you disagree. I think Mitch is probably a no because I think the Knicks want to see how healthy he is and how he plays. I think they might like the idea of an expiring contract motivating him. And if he gave them like a great number, I think they would do it. I just don't see that. And Deuce, who makes 4.3 this year and 4 the next year, I think will just want, again, they have time on their side and he would want a big number. And I think it's a no on both, but I'm willing to hear otherwise.
No, I think I agree. Unless, whenever guys go through the type of stuff that Mitchell has gone through, you do wonder if they want that security. So if there was a happy medium, then maybe, but no, I think you're right.
Before we move on to the other headliners, I mentioned earlier in going through the hero teams, Toronto and Milwaukee. Toronto has RJ Barrett. I'm a no on that. And Milwaukee has AJ Green. I'm going to go a yes on AJ Green. I think they have all year to do it. I don't think there's any timeline on it. And I think I think he's a pretty good fit for Giannis. And I just think he's a decent young player who will take a number that's palatable to both sides. I'm going to go yes on AJ Green. All right, you want to go back to a couple big names?
Let's do it.
We're going to go to your neck of the woods. Zach LaVine. $47 million this year, $48 million player option next year. Basically the same exact deal as Trae Young. He's eligible for an extension. It's a lot. I'm not going to bother to say what the numbers are. What do you think?
No, I think that's a hard no. That was a hard no kind of on day one when the Kings had their front office overhaul and Scott Perry came in. It's, as an aside, and I know you know this context, one of the more unique situations. I don't know that we've ever had a GM get hired and then immediately have to face some stuff that he said in the media. When he did ESPN work, Scott Perry was on record analyzing Zach LaVine as a player.
Ooh,
and
I didn't see this.
You never saw this? Yeah. And to his credit, man, he's cleaned it up, but also at the same time. But what he said at the time, and I'm going to paraphrase, was that Zach LaVine, at the type of money that he's been making for quite a while, is just not enough of a winning player. And he questioned, the fact that Zach had not been in the playoffs all that much and went down that road. Little did he know he was going to get hired by the Kings and Zach would be on the roster. Now, they have discussed, those comments in the past. They appear to be in a good place. I think the relationship is sound. But no, the Kings are trying to figure out what they have and what they're going to do with their core. And I've been told there's no interest in an extension.
I was a hard no. I just see no universe in which the Kings, you could just never underestimate the Kings. Sure. But I see no universe in which they would do it. We're going to come back to this in a second. But another candidate I wanted to hit is Darius Garland. Darius Garland, though, has 3 years left on his deal, fully locked in, 39, 42, 45. I see no, I can't imagine the Cavs are really going to entertain this now with that much time. DeAndre Hunter is eligible for an extension. He has 2 years left. Max Strus also has 2 years left. I think it's a no on all three, given their financial commitments. But Garland is the interesting one I want to zero in on. And I just look at these and the way this would work. Let's just fast forward a year. And then I think it becomes a more realistic discussion for Cleveland because the timetable is a little bit tighter.
Right.
The way this would normally work is Rich Paul, who represents Darius Garland, comes in and is like, hey, look, this guy's an all-star. We want the max. That's it. And that's the whole negotiation. Right. Or at the very least, you see players of this caliber. And let's say this is between on a very good day, the 15th and 35th best player in the NBA, something like that. You almost never see players of this caliber sign extensions that start below the final year of their current contract in terms of money or well below that. And I just wonder in this apron environment, I think Garland is a no for now. Maybe next year it changes. And this relates to LaVine too. And even Cat. I just think in this apron environment, the days of you just walking into extensions that start flat with your current salary, if your current salary is really high. Yeah. I wonder if those are just over and these teams are going to try to push players to recalibrate this and even try to kind of swipe some of these players back on cheaper than they would expect deals because they just say, look, there was no money for free agents this summer. There'll be more next summer, but there'll be extensions signed in between. Everyone is paranoid about the apron. But the days to me of Darius Garland being like, well, it has to start at least $47 million or something because I'm Darius Garland and I'm an all-star. And the team being like, yeah, sure, of course. It feels like teams are going to start, if they haven't already, reconsidering that.
Couldn't agree more. I think we're going to get closer to that ecosystem where the max guys are actually considered max guys. Not to get ahead of our programming, but the idea that even an older Kevin Durant might have to consider taking less than max to me is all that you need to know when it comes to the way things are operating right now. And I think to your urgency point with the Cavs and Garland, that's it. They're not pressured into this right now. They need to see, it's a little bit like the Knicks. They need to see if they can make that one last leap into, the title land they're trying to get to. And if they can't, then they're going to have to reevaluate because Donovan's got a player option in 27. And if Darius is not the perfect fit for him in the backcourt, then you might want to think about doing something there. And the context here, Zach, last summer, there was some massaging that had to happen between Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, and Kenny Atkinson, and that group when it came to, kind of the way the previous season ended. So this is a show me year, I think, for Darius and the group, and then they take it from there.
I called it last week the proof of concept year. Injuries really submarine them against the Pacers in the second round last year. Fine. They've been underwhelming in the playoffs before that. Again, injuries the year before when they lost to Boston, they were decimated in that series. They weren't going to win it anyway, but they were decimated. And then the year before, getting bullied off the floor by the Knicks. They haven't had an encouraging playoff run yet. You can explain all of them away with youth and injuries. And maybe, who knows if they're healthy or not at the end of this year. But this is a prove-it year for them. And if they disappoint in the playoffs again in a way that feels somehow endemic to the fabric of the team, those four dudes are not all going to be on the team next year. The four
100%.
core guys. And Garland would be the most likely, and Allen would be the most likely. Those two, because you're not moving Mitchell and you're not moving Mobley. It's a prove it year, and it's similarly for the Heat with Herro. Just to go back to them, I already said this is bordering on an existential crisis kind of season for the Heat. We lost Jimmy Butler, we don't have a star. We have some of our assets back, but their value is sort of murky around the league, young players and picks. Can we even get a star? How would that happen? Our offense is kind of broken. How do we fix it? How do we modernize it? Have our two tentpole guys kind of peaked at fringy all-star types every year? Or is there something more here? But the Cavs have a higher class existential crisis year, a prove-it year. Let's just do Durant now. I said a couple of weeks ago, when I got back from my sojourns in Europe, that the best prediction I could offer on Durant was I do think a deal will get done. I think the Rockets are probably waiting to get Tari Eason's extension done, joining up with Jabari Smith Jr., and then see sort of what the math is, apron tax-wise, for Durant. I haven't heard anything since to dissuade me from that, but who knows what's been happening. What have you heard?
No, I mean, similar stuff. When they did the deal for Kevin, there was, nothing but confidence coming from the Rockets side that something would get done. Initially, I made the mistake of thinking, usually trades like that, you would almost have a deal in place, kind of informally. At that time, that wasn't the case. I still think something gets done. I'm a little surprised of the Tari Eason hang up and definitely curious to learn more about exactly where that is, because that's a little bit analogous to, the Warriors obviously have all this business that's on hold with the Kuminga stuff where they can't figure out the books and who's going to get paid what. And so I get the delay when it comes to Eason and Kevin. But it would make me a little nervous. I mean, this is a game-changing X factor, move for a Rockets team that obviously made the choice to speed up their timeline. I've seen Kevin Durant in the last year of his deal before with the Warriors, and it's not necessarily a great thing. I think getting him firmed up is pretty important.
He's already announced he's not taking it, and everyone just sort of skirted past the news that he wasn't taking an extension this summer. We should probably at least mention Nikola Jokic, who's the best basketball player in the world.
Sure. Yeah.
Nobody in Denver batted an eye that I heard privately, publicly, when Jokic said, you know what, it doesn't make sense for me financially to do it this summer. Let's revisit it next summer. There's never even been a whisper through coaching changes at the last minute, through roster turmoil, through losing core guys because of tax issues and whatever, through Calvin Booth getting fired at the end of the season, through all that. There's never been a whisper of this guy wants to go to a different team. There's the joke whispers about could he just retire and go back to Sombor and be a horse guy, whatever,
right.
maybe.
Right.
There's never been a whisper, and so we skirted past it. But you just have to flag it that if we get to next summer, it's then it becomes a little bit of an issue. But I mean, look, all the fans of teams whose guys are constantly in trade rumors, like the Bucks, are justifiably why don't you ever mention Giannis? Why is there no panic about that? And it's truly, we mentioned Jokic. It's because there isn't any panic about it. I haven't heard any panic about it. I haven't heard anything from his agency indicating that he's upset about X, Y, and Z and would ask for a trade. Who knows what's possible? That's all I heard.
That's fair. That's something I've actually spent a fair amount of time this summer talking to people about. And as an aside, I mean, I had a Bucks person give me a hard time and say they were just happy that I included Joker in a column about 27 because they were tired of Giannis being by himself. I'm an actions over words person, and my thing is that just because there's no panic in Denver, which that does matter to me, that has not stopped some of these other teams from making, decisions that are at least in part tied to the type of players who might be available in the summer of 27, and Joker being one of them. I mean, Lakers and the Clippers are, obviously a mess right now otherwise, but they are, signaling that they want the freedom in 27. The Warriors are doing the same thing. That's not just about Giannis. That's about the possibility of Joker, the possibility of Donovan. And the Joker thing to me too is, this is a little apples to oranges, Zach, but I told someone when De'Aaron Fox turned down his extension in Sacramento a couple years ago, it was the same narrative. Well, it's only for financial reasons. It's got nothing to do with his feelings about the organization. And it was a life comes at you fast type situation, because 6 months later, it had everything to do with what he actually wanted. Next thing you know, he's pushing his way out of town. So you never know how these things are going to go.
Yeah, the Kings handled that situation beautifully. Just textbook management of a star player and coach and all that. Just a classic Kings. A couple other big names that I'm going hard no on, but just need to be mentioned. Draymond Green is eligible. I don't see it. No. John Morant is eligible. I really don't see it. Zion Williamson is eligible. Don't see it. Don't know how anybody could see it. Any disagreement there?
No, I mean, Draymond's on the same timeline as Steph and Jimmy, and that's the plan. When I go back to the urgency word you picked earlier, there's just none in Memphis, and so many questions, health-wise, off the court-wise. So no, and Zion is similar themes. So I'm with you.
Zion is just a walking question mark at this point, a wide one, wider than the usual typeset question mark. Although he's looked good this summer.
Okay, good.
And Morant, again, 3 years left on his deal as well. This episode is brought to you by Samsung. If you're someone who's constantly bouncing between games, texts, notes, and stats, guilty, the new Galaxy Z Fold7 is for you. Z Fold7 basically turns into a mini tablet when it's open, so you can view up to 3 windows at once. Holy smokes. And watch the game on a wide screen from anywhere. I need that wide screen. Game over, fold it up, and it fits in your hand. Can your phone do that? The Samsung Galaxy Z Fold7. Learn more at Samsung.com. Display measurements are diagonal and actual viewable areas less due to rounded corners and camera hole punch. Okay, then my next homework assignment for you is pick 1 or 2 under-the-radar extension candidates that you find actually interesting to talk about. And did you have any for me?
I've got one for you. It's good old Lakerland. I kind of alluded to it a second ago. The Lakers trying to keep some of their money and their powder dry for 27. It seemed like it was a hard strategy of we're not adding anything. It seemingly softened on that front recently with the idea that they would look at Andrew Wiggins and maybe go after a player like that. So in that context, Rui Hachimura is an interesting guy because, he has given them the type of shooting they need. He's a good fit with Luka. If you're talking about the here and the now, and he's on an $18.2 million expiring deal, he's the kind of guy you would want to lock up. I don't think something's going to happen there, but it's interesting to me because they're one of those teams that's going to continue being conservative for the prospect of what might be down the line. But if they struggle in the present tense, then and then Rui ends up skipping town and your core is diminished as a result of that, then it just makes for an interesting calculus.
I'm thrilled you brought him up because he's on my list of under-the-radar extension candidates. There's been so much attention on Austin Reeves' potential extension, which was just a non-starter from his
never gonna
perspective.
Happen.
It was never going to happen. It was they could not offer him enough money. They can offer Rui Hachimura enough money to pique his interest, I think. His extension would start somewhere like around $26 million and go up from there based on his current salary. I think Rui Hachimura is good. I think he's actually underrated. When I hear the discussions about who would come off the bench if they decide to sign Marcus Smart, he's the de facto answer. And I get that because it's not going to be Ayton. You're not going to start small. And it's not going to be any of the LeBron, Luka, and Reeves is just, it's politically probably difficult for that to happen. I'm just like, I don't know that the answer to the whatever problems the Lakers might have is like less of a 40%-ish three-point shooter with some one-on-one skills and defensive versatility playing around the star players.
Right.
I actually think there's going to be some discussions on this one. I don't know that they'll come to a deal for the exact reason you mentioned about cap flexibility, But I'll bet you there's going to be some discussions about it because I think he's an interesting candidate. Any others? You want me to get my under the radar candidates off?
No, I'll throw it to you. But with one final thought, there is like to me, if they end up swinging and missing on the Wiggins types, I could see it as a plan B, plan C type thing. Like let's go ahead and use some of that money on Rui and not go backwards here.
Okay, my under the radar types. Here we go. I don't know where to start here. I'm going to start on I'm going back to my theory that the extension landscape might change a little bit and become a little bit more team friendly and player unfriendly, and that some smart team is going to try to jump on that and get a guy below market. Like what if just to go back to the Kings, your Kings, Zach LaVine, what is he making? $47 million this year or something like that, $46 million? What if they went to him and were like 4 years, 120, $30 million a year.
Sure.
You lock
Take
it in
down
for 4 years. The instinct would be for him to be insulted by that. That's a $15 million pay cut. And the Kings could say, look at the landscape, look at the apron, look at your age, look at your, playoff resume or lack thereof. And the player I thought about that, not equivalent, but Cam Johnson is sneakily extension eligible for the Denver Nuggets. They just traded Michael Porter Jr. for him. Michael Porter Jr. is extension eligible for the Brooklyn Nets. Don't see that one. Cam 21.1 and 23 in his last year. Could you build something reasonable off of that for both sides? I think you could, except that in 27-28, the Nuggets could have 62.8 Jokic, 53.8 Murray, 34.5 Gordon. And adding a fourth salary, even at like 25, even if you could coax Cam Johnson, it's just a lot to commit. But he's an interesting player, and that's an interesting number. That's all.
I like that. The only thing it would make me nervous if you're the Nuggets, like I want to see it first. I want to see that he was an upgrade over MPJ. That the MPJ number played a big part in why he ultimately ended up getting shipped out. I don't know that you'd want to turn and then attach a big number to Cam right away. The flip side of that in terms of motivations is, if you're Ben Tenzer and John Wallace, the new front office in Denver, and you're feeling good about your ability to pull off this trade in the first place, then, human nature kicks in. Like you want to, firm up those relationships. So maybe you want to go ahead and secure Cam for the long term. But I would lean towards no, because you need to see if Cam makes you that much better and puts you even that much closer to another title first.
I agree. I would lean no. Tamani Kamara, the Blazers can wait a year, so we'll table that. Under the radar candidate number 2, Lou Dort, Oklahoma City Thunder. He is in, let me bring up their cap sheet, 18.2 this year, team option 18.2 next year. So the Thunder control the next 2 years. Similar number to Hachimura in terms of what his max extension, based on his current salary, would be anyway. That's a tough one for the Thunder because obviously they have to be very protective of their future. They have 3 max guys now going forward in Shea, Chet, and J-Dub. And their model is going to emphasize those 3 guys, keep building through the draft and rookie contracts with limited space for the guys in the middle, in the Caruso, Dort, down the line, it could be Aaron Wiggins' salary range, although he's under contract for a bunch more years. Caruso's already locked up through 2029. It's a tough spot for them. Their tax bills are going to be enormous. You pay the tax for a team like this, that's what you do. And, he is a homegrown guy, a guy that they kind of discovered and found and worked with to become a legit 3-and-D starter on a great team. And you want to keep and reward guys like that. It's good for the culture. It's good for the franchise's image. It's just good. Like there's clearly a good bond between the two. I would again lean no for this current offseason / fall because they have the extra year to work with. But and I think he'd have a market if he ever got to unrestricted free agency too, because he's just that good defensively. That would be obviously Thunder fans have started to think about like, are we going to lose Hartenstein because of this? Are we going to lose Dort because of this? This isn't new. It's just, it would be a tough blow to ever see him go away from the Thunder, I think.
If I was Lou, I would be waiting because, man, this league, the way that it doesn't value defense unless you're Rudy Gobert, basically. You got a guy, Lou Dort, who's getting votes for Defensive Player of the Year. Culture-wise, as important as anybody on that Thunder team. 41.2% from three last year and 5.8 attempts. I mean, that fits today's game. So, with those 2 years left, if I'm him, I'm waiting. And again, if you're the Thunder, you're probably encouraging him to wait too, because the number he's going to be looking for is going to absolutely, jam up your books. So it is an interesting one. As you know, the general idea or thought around the league is that either Lou or Isaiah is going to have to go at some point. Isaiah is the guy who brings a ton, but he's new to the program. And Lou, such a cool story, coming from nothing and couldn't shoot back in the day and fixed his shot in the middle of his NBA career, which you never see. But yeah, I don't see a deal happening right now.
Two more quick ones under the radar. Aaron Nesmith has 2 years at $11 million a pop left, locked in, eligible for, I think, 3 years, 63. It's interesting. I don't know that there's been any real discussions there yet, but that's interesting.
It is. And I mean, that's a guy that I think you want to hang on to. So it's, if the number's right, I'm trying to do that at this time when the Pacers are scrambling to recover from, what happened at the end of last year, but looking forward, I'm trying to get something done there.
That could also have been an either-or thing with Nembhard, who's locked up for $20 a year for the next 3 years, and they have $105 million in 27-28 to Halliburton and Siakam. So I don't know, but I live on Aaron Nesmith Island. I was one of the first property owners there. I think that's the kind of guy who you could work with in a deal there that's going to pay him more than he's ever made in his NBA career. And then lastly, the Bulls have some interesting extension situations. The fighting Chicago Bulls playing or bust. Kobe White, I don't think they can offer enough, as I've said before, to get him to sign. Ayo Dosunmu is kind of interesting. He makes $7.5 this year. They can go to 140% of the league average salary, which would be like 18 to 20 a year. I think he's pretty good. He's right in the thick of his prime. I'll bet you there is a number there that they could get to. Now, they're set up to have a bonanza of cap space going forward. The Bulls don't exactly have a good track record of turning cap space into stuff, but just they will have it. That's just one I'd keep my eye on. I have no read for that situation. I have no feel for that situation. I don't think anything has really been broached in any serious way yet. But he's an interesting guy. And they also have some other young guys that are eligible for extensions. But those are my under the radar guys.
I like him. Good work, buddy. Much longer than my list. Just happy to contribute.
I like going under the radar. Okay, now we're going over the radar. We're going to the whole thing that's on the radar. I just can't remember a situation that I have found is interesting from just a what the hell are you supposed to do standpoint than Trae Young's current extension standoff with the Atlanta Hawks. A standoff is strong. There just isn't one, and he sort of passive-aggressively tweeted about team loyalty or some such thing 2 months ago. He's eligible for a 4-year, $230 million extension, according to Bobby Marks. There is no timetable, no deadline. That can sit all year. They have all year to make that decision. He has $46 million guaranteed this year and then has a $49 million player option next year. So theoretically could enter unrestricted free agency in an environment in which there is more cap room. I first want to congratulate Trae Young on maybe the pettiest and most passive-aggressive YouTube video counter-argument rant at Patrick Beverley that maybe I've ever seen. And I want to just give him credit for some masterpieces of passive aggressiveness. Calling him Patty Bev, A+, A+. And just know, and now I know, if anyone ever calls you my guy, you're not their guy. My guy is just a great modern pejorative, like, Pat Bev, my guy. And then at the end, he congratulates Pat Beverley on his NBA career. Says, you deserve all the accolades. Thank you for your contributions to the game on defense. Like way to beat on defense. And and then Pat Bev went back at it and went back. Trae Young, just the level of petty, and he just deadpan, like my guy. Just deadpan, my guy Patty Bev. I wasn't scared of Patty Bev ever, my guy. Just a masterpiece.
Like I have a pet peeve whenever anybody randomly calls you Bud. Like that's my guy. Like don't call me Bud. You know what I mean? Like that's doesn't land well. I'm with you, man. Trae, Zach, I went to a thing in the finals. It was a Kendall Jackson wine event where Trae actually had and a little plug, sorry. Sat down with Mark Spears from Anscape and they kind of hosted a group. And Trae was out there telling stories. And listen, he did a great job. What struck me about this YouTube clip was the guy on that clip was 10x of the guy at the KJ event in terms of charisma and delivery and timing and the pettiness. I mean, even the little clip, and they edited it a bit, but when he is exasperated, he gets out of the chair and he tells his producer, like, man, why are we even doing this? Like, why am I here? Like, I'm too big for this, basically, is what he's trying to say. But it was some good theater.
It was really just a fantastic performance by everybody involved, my guy. The most encouraging thing, by the way, Pat Bev, in his initial rant number 1 about Trae Young, which I don't even know what prompted it, I can't remember, said something about how basically teammates don't like playing with Trae Young. And Trae Young responded by saying, look, I got all my teammates' cell phone numbers. I'm in touch with them. State your source. Who doesn't want to play with me? I think Pat Bev probably exaggerated the degree to which that sentiment has existed around the Atlanta Hawks. But I also I had Kevin Herter on this podcast during the Beam Team year, and I asked him about this. And his response was sort of not exactly a full-throated endorsement of playing with Trae Young. I'll put it that way. Like, I think there's some reality to what Pat Bev said, but the most encouraging thing, if I were running the Atlanta Hawks, that Trae Young said in that 12-minute rant to Pat Beverly was something to the effect of, if you know me, Trae Young, you know nothing makes me happier than helping my teammates succeed. Because that I want you to play like that's really true this year, and not just by getting 11 assists a game. I want you to move off the ball more. I want you to get off the ball earlier and trust our system. I want you to cut a little bit. I want you to not stand at half court off the television screen when you don't have the ball. And I want you to compete on defense, which I think he started to last year. Not good enough, but a start. And I mentioned that Tyler Herro was put in the second most pick and rolls last season of all guards. Trae Young was number 1 by like 200 pick and rolls or something, according to the tracking data. It was a lot. And they have the defensive ecosystem now, I think, to protect him. And why I find his extension candidacy so interesting is, A, I think they're going to be really good this year, and they can see how good they are as they make this decision. B, everything I said about the idea that you just walk into a salary equivalent to what you're making or higher to what you're making in an extension may be changing a little bit, should apply to Trae Young, who's a liability on one end of the floor, who is an all-star who had really one playoff run in his career. I think a third-team All-NBA, like maybe some one or two of those, should apply to him. And yet I look at the Hawks and I'm like, I can justify maybe not the full 4 years, 230, but I can talk myself into a pretty fair and fat deal for Trae Young because 2 reasons. Number 1, they're going to be good. Number 2, depending on what happens with Dyson Daniels, where his number comes in, and Porzingis, who's also eligible for an extension, their finances are actually pretty good for the next 3 years going forward, unless they pay Porzingis a lot, and Trae a lot, and Dyson top end. Then they get into apron territory. Porzingis, to me, is the swing piece. If you conclude you can live without him, you're pretty set, like avoiding the apron and stuff financially, until 28, 29 when Ricochet gets onto his new contract. And number 3, and most importantly, it's all cool to be like, well, Trae Young, what has he won? He's a liability on defense. Just let him walk. He's not worth $49 million or $40 million or $45 million. So what's your plan B as a franchise? Right. You have Jalen Johnson. You've got some really good talent. I love Daniels, Okongwu, Alexander Walker's here now, Jalen Johnson, Asa Newell they just drafted. They also have 2 really valuable future picks coming to them, partially belonging to the Bucks in the next 2 seasons. They have, let me go back and, well, I'll get it later. They have obviously from the Derek Queen trade, they have the most favorable of Milwaukee's and New Orleans pick. And then in 27, they have the least favorable of New Orleans and Milwaukee's pick. Those are 2 good building blocks, but you don't know. Those could be the number 8 pick, the number 1 pick, the number 12 pick, the number 15, but you have no idea what picks you're getting there. And so without Trae Young, it's a bunch of interesting pieces that don't necessarily have anything to fuse them together. And I actually think the argument for extending Trae Young at a pretty big number might outweigh the caution of like, let's just like risk letting this guy go into unrestricted free agency. Even though I could say I think that's the most likely course here is that they do let him go into unrestricted free agency and bet on familiarity, bird rights, the extra year, all that leverage they have. But I think this is as interesting an extension situation as I can remember.
So I'm going to start real quick with the stuff you alluded to about the past. I agree with you that, I think the way Patty Bev put it is that it was the Atlanta Trays is what his source or his kind of fellow player told him that the experience was like with the Hawks. And I do think that was a thing years ago. I reported pretty heavily on that at the time and some of the battles he had with the coaching staff in the front office. And, there was a time when his leadership was, I think, fairly questioned. The irony of this whole situation is that last year, there was a lot of positive feedback coming out of Atlanta when it comes to Trae and the way he carried himself and the way he played and his willingness to, like you said, try to compete more on defense, try to do the types of little things that he hadn't done in the past. And it does create this ironic situation where they have a roster that is pretty, well suited to hide some of Trae's weaknesses and to elevate his strengths. And so what does that number look like when it comes to these talks? Because in the absence of Trae, you are another team that just has some good young pieces. You're not pushing towards some sort of contention. Again, the urgency side of things, if I'm them, I want to see, again, this season, what does it look like? Does Jalen take another step forward? How does Porzingis fit in? All those things. But it is a really interesting landscape. I mean, Trae is a fantastic player. I still think, when you hear him talk about himself at times, yes, I think at times he has a bit of an overinflated sense of where he's at in the league. If you asked him, are you top 15? He's probably going to say yes. And that's just not the case. But, Atlanta is a market where you're going to have a hard time getting stars if you let him go. And you might lose a little window here with the rest of this group where you could actually do something.
I don't know where I would rank him. I know that like he's significantly better than Tyler Herro. The playmaking he brings is A++ and can just not be slept on. The lefty one-handed passes across the court, the gravity he has out to half court, every pass in the bag for a guy his size is crazy. It's crazy what a good passer he is. I'll just put a number on it. Like I said, I don't even know what I would do for Tyler Herro, right? So 4 years, 230 is what he's eligible for. I don't think I would do that. Like, there's no point in me doing that if I'm the Hawks, unless I'm that scared about him walking away and what the downside is for you. I'm not that scared.
Right.
Would I come right now and say, hey, you're making 45.999 this year? How about 4 years, 180, 45 million a pop, 4 years, 190 if you want to make exactly what you're making now? I think I would do that if I were the Hawks. And I think that's a fair offer given the cap landscape, given the fact that, like, if Trae Young had mega trade value, I think he might be on another team. There's at least like a 50-50 shot he wouldn't be a Hawk right now. Maybe 30-70, 70 that he's a Hawk. I don't know.
Right.
I think I would offer that now because I think they're set up to be good enough. I think that deal is fine. I think their financial situation is fine. I'd be more worried about extending Porzingis even at like 28 million to 30 million a year than I would be about Trae Young at that number. He's fairly durable. And I just think they're built really nicely around him. Like, that's, if you're asking me, like, if I'm going into negotiations, I'll offer that right now, Trae Young.
Yeah. I mean, when you were spitballing numbers, 4 for 200 to me is kind of the higher end of that. And again, the value around the league is not really there because every team that looks at Trae and that doesn't have a roster that is constructed around him, obviously he's got to nitpick and focus on what he doesn't do. And so I do think there's a win-win here where they can maybe get something done. And while I know, Zach, that it's a little sacrilege to, when Trae first came into the league, there was a lot of the Steph Curry comparisons right now. So I'm not trying to put those two guys in the same sentence, but I do look at that and I say, all right, Steph, if Trae wants to keep modeling himself after Steph, then he's got to continue doing the things that Steph did, which is get in the weight room and add 15, 20 pounds. Compete more on defense like Steph has. No one is ever expecting you to be that guy on that end of the floor. Klay Thompson always guarded the lead guards. Draymond Green has been a security blanket for Steph all this time, and the Warriors have found a way to just extract all of the goodness out of Steph and what he can bring to the game. That is, I think, still a bit of a model for the Hawks and for Trae himself.
Yeah, this is going to be really interesting because, like I said, there's no timetable for it. They can carry it into the year. I think the Daniels negotiations will be telling if they can strike a deal and what the number is. Ditto Porzingis. I also think the wild card here is the Hawks. I mean, this is like God knows they're not going to talk to me about this even off the record. But anytime a team has some good young players and some piece of Milwaukee Bucks draft equity, I just am like, I'm holding it out there as like, if Giannis ever becomes available,
Sure.
I think they're as well positioned as anybody to make a run at him, and they won't want to do anything to jeopardize that if they gave even a whisper that that's possible, and I don't know that they have or will. Right. But I just think they're well set up, and I would keep Trae Young. Do we miss anybody?
No. I mean, just to get this out of my head, you just made me think of it. I mean, as you know, Alex Ceruti is Giannis's agent.
Was almost the GM. Was interviewed to be the GM.
Right. So that's a little bit of there's some smoke there without question. And like we mentioned, Clippers, Lakers, Warriors, teams like that before that are sitting there kind of quietly pining for the Giannis's of the world. I'm with you that Atlanta should be in that group too.
I mean, if it's a trade, the Hawks can outbid those teams. I mean, just period. If he's just going to be an unrestricted free agent, or just say I'm going to depress the trade market by saying I want to go there and nowhere else, that's a different story. Sam Amick, what can we promote this week? What do you got? You're a machine. What do we got coming?
Brother, I'm just happy you pulled me out of the Clippers world for a few minutes here. Kawhi's got us digging on that front. I'm just getting ready for camp. I'm going to be doing a little Lakers, Clippers, and Nuggets when camp comes around. Go see if Joker finally has a supporting cast. On the Denver side, we talked about Cam Johnson, but just getting rolling. Just ready to do this thing. It's been a couple months now and ready to get back to it.
Sam Amick, it's delightful to see you. I always look forward to seeing you on the road. I hope it happens soon. I'll be moving around camps a little bit, but probably east more than west. Thanks for your time. Read him at The Athletic. Listen to him at The Athletic. Sam Amick, the one and only. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, brother.
All right, let's bring on a special guest, the head coach of the 5-time, but 2 times under him, UConn Huskies. Dan Hurley, how are you, sir?
Zach, 6.
6? Look, I'm rusty.
6 since 99. So, yeah.
I remember 99. I was watching that game in college. Khalid El-Amin, that whole crew in 99. I was watching them beat Duke. You are the author with Ian O'Connor of a book, Never Stop, that's coming out when? I've already read it, but when is it coming out?
End of September. So,
when did you start? When did you decide to write this book? Like, when did this start? And it will become clear why I'm curious about that. When did this process start in your head?
Well, I mean, the publishing companies, after we won the second championship, they become interested in you. You get these proposals, and you get your agent, and different people, suggesting that, this is a pretty good time for you to do it. I had the relationship with Ian. Ian covered me when I played. Unfortunately for him, he covered me when I played at Seton Hall. He had to watch that shit. So, he knew a lot of my story and my background. And I think he was heartbroken because he's a Marist grad. So when I didn't take the Marist job, he was kind of heartbroken on that. So that's, I think, when he got his antennas up with my coaching career. But for me, I was I've been I would say since college, I've developed a love of reading and books and learning. And, through my counselor that I met at Seton Hall, Sister Catherine Waters, she introduced me to The Winner Within, by Pat Riley. I read that, at a pretty vulnerable time. And that's kind of what, I love to read, and I love books. So it was something I got excited about.
So this is happening then during the famous Lakers flirtation, which opens the book. It's the first chapter of the book, basically. We're going to get into Seton Hall and your high school career and all that. But I'm an NBA guy first and foremost, so I got to start with the Lakers, obviously. So that was during the finals. It's only a year and a half ago. I remember vividly where I was when I woke up in Boston and the story broke and what's going on. And as you can recall, Coach, there were all sorts of conspiracy theories. Is this just a leverage play? Is this all fake? Is Dan Hurley really interested in coaching the Lakers? Then there was a second level conspiracy. did Dan Hurley actually go to Los Angeles to do an interview? Did anyone see Dan Hurley in like I saw that on Twitter. And so your entire first chapter feels like kind of a rebuttal to that because it gets deep into the decision, but it gets into specifics like I stayed at this hotel in Los Angeles. I had dinner at this restaurant with Rob Pelinka and his wife. I talked to Brad Stevens and Quinn Snyder and Billy Donovan about my decision. It's like a whole kind of rebuttal to the like, oh, he wasn't really interested in it. And so I just sort of like, do you think back to that process a lot? Because and it turns in the end on Alex Caravan almost, among other things. But like, do you still look back at that and be like, man, that was wild, or I wonder if I'll ever have an opportunity like not in the NBA, but a marquee franchise like that?
Yeah. Well, Zach, I ended up watching more Lakers games this year than I probably have watched since, Kobe and Shaq and the Showtime Lakers, right? So, and I go back to, I go back to almost a year, like a year prior to having my first conversation with Rob Pelinka about the Lakers job. I talked to him like a year earlier about Jordan Hawkins and Andre Jackson, two guys on our 23 championship team. And I talked to Rob on the phone for probably 15 or 20 minutes about those two guys. And I remember calling Kamani Young and Luke Murray and a couple of people around me after hanging up with Rob and saying, wow, like I was really impressed, by, Pelinka with the Lakers. Like he was pretty detailed with the way he spoke about my guys. So then when that Lakers thing came up a year later, like I had this baseline of respect for Rob. And that's what, got me excited about the possibility. For me, I've got a network. Any big decision that I've got to make, or during the course of the season, I'm smart enough to stay connected, with the people that I like to take advice from when I got to make big decisions, whether they're people in coaching or people in the media like Woj, who anytime I've got to make a big decision, in my life career-wise, Woj is one of the first calls I'll make.
Then they trade for Luka. What's your phone like that day when that happens? Like you wake up, or are you awake when it happens? I don't know if you're a night owl, if you're asleep when it happens. But what's your phone? Are you getting texts like, "Hey man, this could have been you"?
Yeah, I got some of those. But I'd say a majority of it is it's Lakers fans, direct messaging you that you're the biggest moron. Look how stupid you are.
You got to close your account. You can prevent that from happening.
As soon as I get off this, I think, because I'm sure they'll respond to this, but I would say, while we're not having the season that I thought I was going to have at UConn, now that trade goes down, and you're getting a lot of those messages, but then your mind also probably, goes there a little bit, like, man, you could have coached LeBron and Luka on the same team.
You say later in the book, you talk about having thoughts after last season, which ended with the second round loss. Generally, like the 3P dreams didn't really materialize. You talk about how you thought about taking a year off, or taking a gap year, or even resigning as head coach of UConn. And then after that in the book, you reiterate like, oh no, I still want to go to the NBA at some point. When UConn administrators read that, are they going to be like, dude, really? And it, like that is that like a firm thing? Like you really, that's still like a box you want to check for sure.
It's weird. I think, Zach, it's like they're maybe 8 months ago, that could also be maybe the way I felt, then, or 4 months ago, like I think as human beings, I think, you feel differently over time about different things. I think, for me, that time where I'm considering, taking a year off, I think, number one, I've been in this basketball world probably in a really intense way since I was 5 years old. like my whole life has been basketball. I think since me and Bob, got out of the crib, we've been in every St. Anthony practice and every St. Anthony huddle and every St. Anthony locker room, living and dying with every season that my dad ever coached until we got a chance to play for him and experience that, all the way through to, this past season ending. And obviously I've had a ton of ups and downs in my coaching career, but I think when you go back-to-back championships, there's so many directions you're getting, pulled in, that drain a little bit of your energy, like your off seasons are shorter. You've got more demands on your time. There's more appearances to make and things to do that way. You couple that, maybe fatigue with, the NIL and the portal, and how transactional that is. You also add on top of that, obviously I had a tumultuous year. I was deconstructed. My coaching style was obviously, a lot went on that put me in that mindset for a couple days. But then, in the end, I think that what was the deciding factor for me was I was likely not going to be able to coach UConn again. It wasn't like they were going to, let Kamani have the job or Luke have the job for a year and then, just do interim and just give me a year to relax. I mean, the fact that I could no longer lead the Huskies was why, I was able to, just kind of get myself back together again and move forward.
But the NBA still on your radar? Or are you saying like that's something that was 4 months ago and you wrote this book and that's going to be an evolving thing?
I mean, listen, I don't. Maybe later, I don't know that it's necessarily a fit for the way that I coach. And the way that I like to be a coach of 18, 19, 22-year-olds, where I can set the standard, every day where you're truly in college basketball. I think, the head coach sets the tone, he sets the standard, and then the players have to live up to that standard. I think there's a lot more control you have, even though NIL and the portal, have obviously, diminished some of that control. But I think, the amount of control you have on your fate as a college coach, and, me being a better fit for coaching a 19-year-old, makes me think that, maybe when I'm in my mid 60s and I've burned off a lot of this intensity and fire and I'm at a different energy level or mental space, I could do it, but I don't think so.
It's funny, not funny, but intensity and fire. There are good chunks of the book that are about your internal suffering, I would say, based on your perfectionism, your fear of losing, but also like legit kind of coming to grips or thinking about your anger toward officials, your anger towards opposing fans. And obviously last season culminates with the videotaped, I hope they don't fuck you like they fucked us. And you talk in the book, it's like reading the book is like listening to someone struggle with what on the one hand they consider a problem about themselves, but on the other hand, they consider some part of their fundamental nature that makes them who they are. Yeah. So, and you talk about your wife telling you like several times in the book and several times, and Coach K telling you like, dude, you gotta chill out. This is embarrassing on the sidelines. Your wife's like, you gotta chill out. And you want to, but it seems like you also kind of don't want to. So do you want to get better with the refs? Cause that's the kind of thing, like in the NBA, you'd be getting calls from Adam Silver being like, dude, you can't do that.
Well, I get that. I actually hear that a lot, Zach. It's like, some really smart analysts have, when they've critiqued my coach, criticized it, they've I think one of the critiques or criticisms has been, hey, act more like an NBA coach, that is not on the officials as much as you are as a college coach. But then my response to that is like, they would be in line behind several of the players who are literally, in the ref's ear after every possession. Like a lot of times a head coach in the NBA doesn't have a chance to get at the ref because he's got, a couple of his players after that possession want to foul, want to travel. You in college, I think you have the coach that's interacting with the officials exclusively, and the players say next to nothing. Where in the NBA, I think it's flipped. It's a reversed. Where do I go from here? I mean, I get pulled in a lot of different directions there. I've got an identity that's been very successful for me, and it's worked for me. I run into people, old school coaches, whose coaches in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 80s Big East, those early Big East days, the Bob Huggins, those types of coaches. Like, I resemble, my coaching style is more like those coaches, but those are the coaches that I idolized, as a young player and as a young coach. So, I would say, if I could just be able to, get on and off the court without the fan, like the 2 rings, Baldy, like those types of things, if I could avoid those, it would be, those are the ones I think I've got to be able to walk away from, maybe some of the fan stuff.
But you seem to also like that, and you're quite proud of the Baldy insult. Was it a Creighton fan that you called Baldy? Because and you have a whole very humorous. It's like a comedian comes out and starts writing the book. A whole aside about why you, as a bald man, are allowed to call this guy Baldy. You seem to feed off the fans too.
Yeah, it's like the Larry David. Like the Larry David of college coaches in a way. Again, the gentleman he waited such a long time for that interaction, like it's literally an 8 or 10 minute wait for me to get to the tunnel after the post-game handshake, the post-game TV, kind of the half a victory lap. And then he's still waiting there. I felt like he deserved something. And again, there's a difference between being Baldy and balding. I'm balding. But in the end, karma got me, not too much, later down the line, I had to see that same Creighton game, and for running my mouth on the road, karma got me in the Big East tournament, and we ended up, losing to those guys and getting dunked on, at the buzzer, which was why, even, when their player dunked the ball at the end of that Big East tournament game, and there was a whole scene on social media after that, I wasn't really mad at Big Mac, at McDermott, or, even the player or Creighton. In a weird way, I felt like I kind of got what I deserved for being such an asshole in Omaha.
This is going to be my last thing about the refs, and I got to call you out on it. It's a form of coach hypocrisy that I almost respect, because it's all about it's about how your desire to win trumps everything else. So when you're coaching Wagner and Rhode Island, okay, and you run into the power schools, Duke, Kentucky, whoever, and there's a call you don't like, you'd say, well, against your team, say, well, you wouldn't call that against Duke or Kentucky. You're sort of alleging favoritism of the blue blood programs. And then later in the book, when you get the UConn job and you win national titles and you become a blue blood program, you have this. I think it's at the Maui Invitational in 2024. Liam McNeely gets called for over the back, and you write in the book, like, we're the defending champs. Like, you got to respect us more than that. You got to give us that call. I'm like, oh, wait a second. Which way is it? But I guess which way it is whatever is going to help Dan Hurley's team win.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I accept, dealing with the officials, right? Like relating your relationship with the officials, like your ability to work the officials, whether that is through charm or through, rage and intensity. I mean, that is part of coaching. You could say that I absolutely suck at it, that I am really bad at the art of working officials. But to say that that's not part of what we do as coaches is that's an aspect of the art of coaching that, again, you could I won't disagree with you that I suck at it at times.
Oh, I didn't say you suck at it. I almost respect the change in philosophy as your career arc evolved.
Well, it's whatever works for me. I mean, and listen, I experienced it. When you coach at Wagner or when you coach at Rhode Island and you're playing in a bye game on the road, I mean, when I played at Texas A&M as a first-year coach at Wagner, the refs, when I wanted to just ask them a question, they wouldn't even look at me. It was like I didn't even exist in the universe. They wouldn't even almost acknowledge that I was at the game. And then so now when you are the coach at and then like when you take over at UConn and Jay and Villanova are the premier program in college basketball, and you're trying to rebuild UConn and climb your way up back towards, closer to the top of that mountain. When you're experiencing those games and you're watching them after the fact, you do feel like, you're not getting the same whistle that Villanova is getting in those games. And then part of you, I think, believes that they've earned that. Now, in the moment, you're fighting for that, but in your mind, once you've established yourself as championship level program, the premier program in college basketball, you feel like there's a certain respect that you should get, from the officials, and that you earn that, and that's part of what you get by being the best.
Hey, I respect it. It's actually, this is kind of a bookend podcast for me, because almost exactly a year ago, I had JJ Redick on my podcast to talk about the Lakers. And I got laid off immediately after that by ESPN. And JJ jokes with me that he got me fired. Something I did in an interview got me fired. And now a year later, I have the almost Lakers coach on. But I was one of the great joys of being laid off for me was I got laid off right in the middle of a Mets playoff run, and I rekindled my Mets fandom. And now when I watch through the eyes of a fan, and the umps are against us, or can you just give us that call? We're struggling. I know it was a couple inches outside. Could you just give it to us? I get it. All right, enough ref talk. You're about 4 years older than I am, and I grew up in Connecticut, and I grew up a fan of the Big East, the old school Big East, Georgetown, Syracuse, Seton Hall, UConn, St. John's. I remember rooting hard for Seton Hall to win the national title when they played Michigan, Ramil Robinson and all that. That's my roots as a basketball fan. And I remember watching you at Seton Hall, and obviously I watched your brother at Duke. I was just an idiot teenager then. I had no idea the emotional struggles you were going through at Seton Hall. And the first part of the book is about that and about how they shaped your life. I don't even remember you stepping away from the team at Seton Hall to deal with the stress and pressure. And I hope maybe you can elaborate on this. I don't want to spoil the book, but not only did you step away from the team, you didn't tell them what you were doing, and you just essentially locked the door to your dorm room and vanished from society. Maybe talk a little bit about, was it basketball pressure? Was it life pressure? What was happening to you, and what did you learn from it?
Yeah, I mean, listen, Zach, that was that was a tough time. I mean, it was also too. This was, this was the early '90s. There was big stigma, at that time around mental health and around, having a vulnerability about yourself to ask for help, especially with men. And for me, it was a real simple thing. It was. It was hearing those whispers early on as a player. Bobby's better. He's not as good as his brother. He's only won this award, or he only has this scholarship because he's a Hurley. So it starts off as whispers, and then, obviously you get to a program, like Seton Hall, and you're a college freshman, and your brother, your brother is having, historical success. He's not just like a really good player at Duke. He's like the greatest point guard in the history of college basketball at Duke, on basically the Beatles of college basketball at that time, which is Christian Laettner, Grant Hill, Coach K, and my brother. And for me, it just got to the point, just relative to the identity that I had shaped and how important basketball was to our family and in Jersey City growing up there, that I had no identity beyond basketball. So once I started to play like shit, the levels of shit that I felt like had gotten to, a pretty dark place for me. And, it was like the perfect storm. We had played, and then the next day we had a day off from the team. So, and back then there were no cell phones. There was a phone in the dorm. And I just basically, I holed up for a couple days until, until people started getting worried about where is this guy? He has not gone to class. He has not gone to study hall. And then, it was during winter break, so there were no other students there. So then, I was fortunate that my mom came and started banging on the door.
You also were, as many college freshmen, college students would do. You were carousing a little bit, and you talk in the book a lot about drinking and health and the ups and downs of that. There is also an aside in there that I had to ask about, but you just sort of say it and leave it. You crashed a golf cart at some point at Seton Hall. I need to know more about the golf cart crash.
Yeah. Oh man. So yeah, I would say, my dad, he ran a tight ship.
Yeah.
I mean, he ran a tight ship. I mean,
our fathers are similar, by the way. My dad is like a coaching lifer and like a hard ass, the likes of which kind of doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, the ship was tight. I mean, listen, as a high, did me and Bob sneak out, the basement window, at times in high school and run around the streets of Jersey City for a couple hours when we shouldn't have, probably in high school. We probably did that, Zach. But when I got to college, man, I just all that freedom, I kind of just, I went from all that structure to all that freedom, and I just kind of lost my mind. And, just growing up in Jersey City, you had a skill set that you would be able to start smaller vehicles, with a mail key and kind of jig it so that you can, potentially, start up a security car. And that the next probably 10 minutes, things unraveled from there. And I made a very un-Jersey City like move. Once I saw the sirens.
What was the move?
You're the book is called Never Stop.
Yes.
Right. So, I guess for me there, with campus security, I probably should not have stopped running at that point, because I started running distance as a young kid. My dad, I think, built up my mental toughness as a child with Bob by putting us in cross country and having us run a lot, just run a lot of distance running to become mentally tougher. And, that night I definitely could have outrun, the Seton Hall campus security.
Never Stop is also about your coaching journey, and I don't want to spoil the book, but it's to describe it as unlikely would be an understatement. From high school coaching, making so little money that you had to you go to, there's this sort of centerpiece story of the book is you're at a gas station and you realize you have no cash, your credit cards are maxed out, you literally cannot pay for the gas, and you have to ask people who come in for cash to cover the gas, and now you're the coach of UConn, turning down a 6-year, $70 million offer from the Lakers. I in all of that high school coaching and Wagner and URI and all this, you have something in there that so resonated with me as a fan of basketball and college basketball, less so now, but when I was a kid for sure. You talk about being at Wagner and losing to Robert Morris in whatever conference, I don't even remember what conference it was, but the conference tournament. And in a conference that's only getting one team into the NCAA tournament, the automatic bid, and that's it. You talk about that as the most tense experience you've ever had as a coach. Is that still true? Because I can imagine it being true. Like everything rides on that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the Final Four, the national championship game, which really does feel like a zero-sum game at that point, because getting to the national championship game and losing it, that's a tough one, being so close. But that was a breeze compared to one bid, semifinal, a chance to play to get to March Madness, which is really at that level the only way that you're going to get attention during the year, with the exception of maybe going and winning a bye game, which is next to impossible to do. So yeah, I mean, you're in those games, and shoot around feels different. You could feel the anxiety with the group, with the staff, with the players. The ball feels like it's got butter on it. I mean, the turnovers go up, the not being able to remember out unders and things that are deeply embedded, that are also almost automated at that point of the year for your team, all go out the window, and it turns into like a mud fight in a UFC cage.
Let's go rapid fire some NBA topics, because I know you got to go. I don't want to keep you. What have you thought of Donovan Clingan so far in the NBA?
I think I think he got off to a pretty good start. I think that situation right now, obviously with the trade of Ayton, or I guess the release, or however that went, with the opportunity to start at center here, he's a unique defensive player that I think if he locks in right now, he's one of those guys, I think, that has the ability to develop new skills rapidly and become, I'm not saying that he's going to look like the Joker overnight here, but I think this is a guy that's going to develop shooting, develop passing, so he could play in this modern NBA. But I think what we've all told him this summer is, like, you get these windows when you get drafted to establish yourself as like a starting NBA center, and he's seeing that window right now, and he's got to take advantage of it. Because NBA organizations, if you don't show them quickly, they move on pretty quickly.
Have you talked to Stefan Castle about Wembanyama, and has he told you like what this guy is like, what playing with him is like?
Yeah, he just shakes his head, and Steph has gotten better at communicating, but he's not much of a talker. He's a doer. But he, freak alien. And it was awesome to see, Steph. I mean, Steph, you could see it. I think when pre-draft last year, I was thinking like a, Drew Holiday type of NBA guard. I think he's just a little bit taller, and obviously a long way to go before he can get to that level. But you could see it was probably easier for him to score, in the NBA than it was for him in college. But I think people forget, if you just locked in on his last 10 games at UConn, he was our best player probably the last 10 or 12 games. His numbers and everything jumped that last third of the year. He was a monster.
Now this is in the book, but I'll just ask you anyway. Where were you during Duke Kentucky Elite Eight 1991? The Leitner shot. Crushing
beers in Boland Hall, the freshman dorm, just crushing beers with my roommates, running up and down the hallway when that shot went in, because it looked over, obviously it looked over. And I thought about, hanging out there and going to the game, but, just that would have been a bad look. I think maybe a player would do that today. But back then players would not have done that to their team. You just get back on the bus and you go with your team. You failed, you lost, go home. Your season's over. You're not making public appearances, or, so yeah.
I only asked because, well, it's interesting, but also look, I can't claim to have watched every game of every professional sport ever. I'm sure there are soccer games that are all-time great games. Even the France-Argentina World Cup final from the last World Cup was like, I was falling out of my chair. That game is still the greatest game I've ever seen in any sport. I don't know if I was the right age at the right time, the right kind of sports fan. I don't know if it was the back and forth of like one shot after another. I don't know if it was like the underdog nature of this team, Kentucky, that had just come off probation against like Coach K and Duke and like these, in my mind, these pretty boy guys that play at Duke. It's the greatest game I've ever seen, and I've never watched it since. I would like to. Have you watched it since?
Yeah, well, I did, and because I think I probably watched it on ESPN Classic a couple times, and I mean, just the game that my brother played there was ridiculous, and I was able to, I was at the old Meadowlands, when they played UConn, in the Elite Eight, I was there for that, so. Obviously, an amazing win for Duke, a crushing loss for UConn. I was in Denver for the UNLV, just destruction of Duke in that game, and, what that experience felt like for my brother and Duke and the family and Coach K. And I was in Indy the next year, for the epic UNLV rematch, that incredible upset. So, I was at a lot. And then on the negative side, I think for the Dukies, I was at the UConn, the UConn game. I'm looking out in the practice facility to make sure I get the year right, 2004, the second of the six, right? In San Antonio, with that awesome game with, Ben Gordon, JJ Redick, Emeka Okafor. I mean, and I sat next to, my brother in the Duke section for that game.
To me, it's still the greatest game I've ever seen. You mentioned in the book all the people who reached, both people you knew, people you saw in person, people you didn't know, who reached out to you when the Lakers decision was pending, from Governor Ned Lamont to random people who see you at a Billy Joel concert and are like, you got to stay, it's UConn, to old friends who run into you on the street and say, dude, you're from Jersey City. You can't go Hollywood. And I asked you before we came on, I was like, who's the most, I mean, some of those are expected, right? The coaches are going to reach out. You're going to reach out to the coaches. The governor reaching out is not entirely unexpected. Who's the one that reached out in whatever capacity where you were like, whoa, this person cares? Or like, how'd this guy even get my number? Or this person from my life, how did they even find me? Like, was there somebody like that?
I tried to rack, I tried to rack my brain. I actually tried to go back through my phone and check, but I think, the only thing I came up with was like the multitude of people, like, in the NBA, or I would say like the multitude of people that wanted a job with the Lakers with me before I had taken the job. Like the 8, 10, 12 different people that say, like, hey, I'd be a great fit in LA. I know that, I could, that. I would say the people like that, and that happens, that was multiplied with the Lakers thing. That happens a lot in college. Like before I actually officially took the UConn job, when I was leaving Rhodey, you start to get like the college lifers that start crushing you on the phone. And then I would say that was multiplied like 5X, 8X, 10X with the Lakers, with NBA lifers.
So I told this to JJ, I think even on the now infamous last podcast I did at ESPN, like I was getting that from NBA coaches being like, hey, do you know JJ? Like, I know you did some podcasts with JJ. Like, can you hook me up with JJ or put in a good word? And I just have a blanket. Like, I'm not bothering him. And I was like, if that's happening to me, I can't even imagine what your phone is like. All right, last question, open-ended. We kind of sped through Seton Hall. We kind of sped through the high school coaching part of your career at St. Benedict's, a school that I know quite well, by the way. I loved your animus towards Lawrenceville and Joakim Noah. That was fantastic. Just is there a part of this book that you wanted to make sure people know about, or that you wanted to talk more about, or just something about why you wrote this book that you want to get across to people before I let you go?
Yeah, I just think for me, and it's kind of strange coming from me, who, I didn't exactly excel as a college student, but I would say, one of the most impactful things for me at that time at Seton Hall, I think, my life is, any success I've been able to have, in my life, I'm a byproduct of like my faith, with my faith and my Christianity, and then like the family foundation, just like the household that I grew up with or grew up in. And then, the family, the gift of family that my wife, Andrew, has given me, with her love and my two sons, Danny and Andrew. So like, my faith in my family and how that's been my foundation. But then, for me, like this project, I put a lot of work into it, like a lot of work to try to make this, a book that could have some impact. Again, reading and learning, and books were introduced to me really, with Sister Catherine at Seton Hall at a time, where it's had a great impact on my life, whether it's been memoirs or biographies have been a lot of times inspirational or motivational, like books on leadership and personal development books. I think have made me a better coach and a better man and a better husband and father. I think like great sports books about, excellent teams and world-class coaches and athletes, like, they've helped me, develop a culture at the different places I've coached that have had championship level success. The books about spirituality have helped me, develop a stronger faith. So I think for me, this wasn't like one of those things where it's like you win championships. It's an opportunity, as a money grab to go and write a book and check that box. For me, I hope that the book is impactful, and I hope people that read it say like, you contributed a real good book.
Yeah, I will say, there's, for the basketball fan and the UConn fan, there's a lot of inside basketball stuff that people are going to crave, like, oh, shooting half-court shots before practice. He made this crack at this player running stairs and all this, and all the stuff with the refs. But I would say, to your point, a lot of this book is like wrenching to read. It's painful in parts to read. Like the pain, the ups and downs of your life are like very, very stark and the downs are pretty down. And I think, it's just sort of a reminder, like, people look at successful people and say, well, that's inevitable, or they're blessed with something special, or like it must have been a smooth journey all the way around. And it's like, this was not a smooth journey. And there were lots of times where it could have gone real bad. I mean, and like, I don't want to spoil it, but like as bad as it could possibly get.
Well,
and I think there's
Zach, when they send it to you, I don't want to, just for me, it's important. Like when I read the chapters about, like the times in high school or college, or like that, the tough times of, family life when you're struggling financially and you're struggling in your marriage, partially because of the finances and because of your career's not going the way you want, or, I'm dealing with that time at Seton Hall. That's very dark depression. Like rereading that part of this book when you're going through like the publishing process, was tough for me. Like I'm taking a step back and like this, like it put me in a little bit of a funk after I had to kind of reread it and make changes to the manuscript. So like rereading it during this process kind of brought me back, and that wasn't always enjoyable.
Well, I just mentioned it because it's human, and in sports, as in many other areas of life, we sort of build up these mythological gods out of players and coaches, and that's just not real. And what's real is what's in the book. So it's called Never Stop: Life, Leadership, and What It Takes to Be Great. Dan Hurley with Ian O'Connor. Dan, you've been generous with your time. I appreciate it. It's a great book. I brought it on vacation with me. I read it. It was awesome. I got notes in here and everything. Good luck this season at UConn. And you know what? I'm gonna have to make the drive up to Storrs to visit you and Coach Auriemma and actually do it and hang out for a day or two. So I appreciate your time. Everyone get the book. Coach Dan Hurley, thank you, sir.
Zach, appreciate you, man. It's an honor.
All right, that's it for today's edition of the Zach Lowe Show. Thanks to Sam Amick of The Athletic. Thanks to Dan Hurley for spending some time with us. Thanks to Jesse Victoria, and Ceruti on production. Thanks to you all for watching or listening wherever you get your podcast. We'll be back later this week, probably Thursday, with another edition of the Zach Lowe Show. Maybe Mets Corner may be involved. Who knows? I'm sad. Thanks for listening.